This is a letter that I have written to my third passport. Dear Third Passport, I last wrote to you on the 11th of February 2016. So much has happened since then, almost 10 years ago. I owe you so much. You have been one of the most life-changing friends. With you in hand, I have been able to explore so much more of this beautiful world. I want to share a timeline outlining so many of our adventures together. In 2016, you took me to Scotland for the 5th time. We landed in Glasgow on March 1st and stayed for 55 days. On April 25th, you took me from Edinburgh to Copenhagen, Denmark for 21 hours. While here, I stayed overnight with my dear friend Jacques, with whom I attended Utah State University in the late 90s and early 2000s. In 2018, you took me back to Scotland for my 6th visit. We landed in Edinburgh on February 27th and stayed for 42 days. On April 10th, we flew over to Dublin, Ireland, and toured around the country for 21 days. On this trip, we flew home out of Belfast. 2019 was my 7th visit to Scotland. This was a new experience flying out of Stewart International Airport, SWF, in New Windsor, New York. I landed in Edinburgh on March 2nd and stayed for 38 days. On April 9th, I flew down to London Gatwick, spent one night, and caught a flight on the 10th to Seattle, Washington. I flew home non-revenue from there to Oakland, California, and then on to Salt Lake City, Utah. I remember bringing you to Hawaii for my very first visit in February of 2020 for a family reunion. Even though I wasn't required to bring you, this trip sticks out in my mind. Not only was this the first time we were starting to hear about the coronavirus, but I remember flying home on February 28th, being home for only 4 nights, and returning to the Salt Lake City International Airport on the 1st of March to catch a flight to Los Angeles, and then later that night all the way to London Gatwick. By the evening of March 2nd, I was enjoying my 8th visit to Scotland. This visit lasted 23 days. I flew home out of London Heathrow via Detroit, Michigan. In April 2021, the world was finally emerging from quarantine. Even though masks were still required, we felt like life was beginning to open up. With you and my roommates, Paul and Pip, we decided to head back to Hawaii. It turned out to be a whirlwind 2-week adventure in which Paul actually went missing overnight. Again, you weren't required to come with me, but I'm glad you did. I believe we were there for 2 weeks. While we were still in Hawaii, some dear friends invited us to travel with them down to Rocky Point, Mexico. We were only home in Tucson for a few days when we found ourselves staying in a beach house from April 29th until May 8th. This was also the first time I had ever traveled with my dog Reba. 2022 was the year that you and I first visited Peru. I fell in love fast. I landed in Lima early in the morning on the 9th of November, then caught a connecting flight to Cuzco. I stayed for 26 days, leaving Lima for the United States early in the morning on the 5th of December. Come to find out, I left Peru just in time because only days later, a few months of political unrest started, and it became very unsafe for tourists, especially white ones like myself. On the 25th of February, 2023, as you may have guessed, you and I were back in Scotland for our 9th visit. This trip was cut short, however. I received word that my mother's sister, my dear Aunt Dixie, had passed away. I decided the best thing to do was to come home early to be with my family. On the 20th of March, I flew home via London. Even though the trip was cut short, I still got 23 amazing days in this country that I love so much. By the 16th of June, we were in Peru for the 2nd time. This time, you and I stayed for 46 days. By the time I left the country, I felt a newfound energy and desire to learn Spanish. I have, however, discovered that intentions mean nothing when you're old and set in your ways. Still, I try to learn a little more each day. I don't know if I'll ever have the confidence, however. The translation software on my iPhone usually saves the day. Halfway through this trip, I was joined by my dear cousin Megan. We got to spend so much time together, and even though I knew her, I only wish that I had gotten to know her even better. You never know what God has in store. Only a few weeks after she returned to the States, she unexpectedly passed away. Before I knew it, I was with family in Utah, celebrating Megan's life.